Hi guys, today in this lesson we are going to look at one of the most important things, and that is collectibles. Being able to walk around and collect something and have it affect your score. Now this that we're doing today is just concentrating on increasing your score, and it's not for collecting things like health and ammo and all that sort of stuff. We're going to cover that in a later lesson. So collectibles for score. So first thing we need to do is create a collectible. Now, I need you guys to be nice and imaginative. I'm not going to be. I'm going to use a Sonic the Hedgehog coin, which is going to be quite small. So the first thing I'm going to do is create a torus, scale it down, smooth it out. I'm going to call it coin. Very important we label everything. Give it a new material. And label that coin as well. So the coin's there. I'm going to stick it towards the floor. What's really important, guys, is that you program the coin before you start copying and pasting it. Now, if you copy and paste it, you're going to have to program every single coin separately. Program it, test it so it works, off you go. Right, here we go. So we've got an object here, a coin, and what we're going to do is we're going to make it so that it spins, because at the minute it just sits there. You may think we need to animate it, but because it's going to just rotate, we're going to just add a motion sensor, an always sensor and a motion actuator. You'll see it's got no dynamic settings, and I'm just going to stick one in all of the rotation axes. Don't do it in location, otherwise it's going to move, obviously. Call it coin spin. Now I'm taking the time to do this because you guys need to do it in order to show that you can keep an organized workflow. Coin spin. So what does the coin do? It now spins. If we crash into it, we sort of bounce off of it. So we want to go into the physics type for it and set it to be a ghost and to be not to be invisible, for it to be a ghost. What that means is when you touch it, you won't bounce off it, you can sort of go through it. So what we need to do is we need to make the coin disappear when we hit an object. Now this is why it's important that your main cube has a material. So I'm going to give him a material, even if the material is just grey. And I'm going to leave mine as sort of like a whitey grey, but I'm going to call it player 1. This won't work unless your main cube has a material. So clicking back on the coin, I'm going to add a collision sensor, and what it's going to do is this is going to be called collect, as in it's been collected, and it's going to detect when it hits the player. So MP, and we're going to use player 1. You could just leave that blank, but the problem is if a projectile or something else hit it, then you might have a problem as well. Whenever we want to add a new object or get rid of an object, we use the edit object actuator, and all we're going to do is end the object. And we'll call it collect. Caps lock on. Brilliant. So what's going to happen is if the coin hits our player, it disappears. It's been collected. That's great, but the problem is it doesn't actually tell us how many coins we have collected. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go up to the top of our scene, and I'm going to label the scene level 1. And I'm going to create a brand new level. I'm not going to copy it, I'm just going to create a brand new one. And we're going to call this the HUD, heads up display, like a fighter pilot would have. We're going to create, so we're going to go up to where your add is, and we're going to add a new camera. Mine's in a slightly different place. I'm going to set everything to 0 in terms of the rotation, and just lift it up. And if I look in it, it looks like that. So what you've got to imagine is that's our scene when we're in level 1. So in the heads up display, I'm going to add a cube. Now I'm going to show you how I did this within the lesson so that you guys can sort of get a feel for it. Flatten it out because it's supposed to be sort of like a 2D object. And then all I'm going to do is I'm going to move it over here, scale it down a bit because that's way too big at the minute. Now you can do it however you want. The way I did it was to put it into edit mode. You don't have to do it like this, obviously. I press Ctrl R twice to create two cuts. Just extruded the cuts out. Extruded one out a little bit further. And made sort of like an object. Real basic object, something that looks like that. Back in object mode. Give it a material, label it, make sure you call it sort of score counter. And we've got a score counter there. If we move it up and down, we can make it smaller or larger. It's going to look like a 2D object. And all we're going to do then is we are going to go and we are going to add some text. You guys go to add and text. And it appears here. So our text, what we need to do is come out of the camera and we need to make sure that the text is in the same position as our object, as our cube. That looks pretty good to me. Back in the camera and I can press S to scale it down, go into edit mode and set it to 0. Because your score obviously is going to be 0. Back into object mode and put it towards the left because the score gets bigger progressively this way. Looks pretty good. So what we're going to do now for this is we're going to go back into our level 1, and for our camera, which is this thing, we're going to click on it and we're going to always, so we'll call this HUD. We're going to always add a scene. We said scene was anything to do with the camera as well. And instead of changing the camera, we're going to overlay the other scene, the heads-up display scene, over the top of this one. Add overlay scene. And the overlay scene we're going to add, obviously, is the HUD. We'll call it HUD. So if we play the game, then we get the overlay in the bottom left-hand corner, which is pretty cool. It doesn't actually do anything yet. It's just an overlay scene. We collect the coin. Doesn't do anything. So what we're actually going to be doing now is going back into the HUD. We've got this here. We need to make it more intelligent. And to make it more intelligent, we need to add properties. Now, if you remember, properties are found here on your system. For me, it's over here. Normally we'd add a game property, but because this is special, we're going to add a text property, which makes things simpler for us. It's already set to string. It needs to be integer. And we're just going to leave it as it is. Game property, text game property, integer. Good. We can sort of make that smaller now. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to say, we're going to look out for a message from our player. And we'll call it score up. And what we want to do is want to get a subject. We're going to put the subject as up. And we're going to add a property actuator. We'll call it score up. And we'll add, every time we hit that particular coin, you could have special coins, we'll add to the text 1. While we're in here, if we die in our game and the game resets, then our score is not going to reset, it's going to carry on. So I'm going to add another one. I'm going to send another message to it as well. I'm going to call it reset. I'm going to use the text reset. You might notice I've used lowercase in the subject. That's because it's case sensitive, so I just want to make things easy for myself. I'm going to add a property and I'm going to set it, so reset, and I'm going to assign it 0. So if this receives a message that says up, it will add 1 to itself. If it receives a message that says reset, it will reset its value to 0. Let's have a look if that works. Well, at the minute, it doesn't work because we've got nothing actually sending it a message. Now, the problem is if we make the coin send it a message, when we hit the coin, it deletes itself, and it will delete itself before it can send the message. So actually, by putting a material on both the player and the coin, we can add that to the player instead. So we click on the player and we'll do a collision, and the collision will be called score up. We don't want the score to go up if we hit anything. It's something specific. It's the coin. And we're going to get it to send a message. Sending a message to the text. And the subject was up in lowercase, if you remember. So we'll call that score up as well. Brilliant. So what should happen now is if you hit the coin, it sends it a message, and there you go. It goes to 1. Okay, but what happens if we die in the game? Well, let's make it so that if we fall off, we die. So let's add another floor. I'm going to add this floor. I'm going to duplicate it. Lower it down a bit, make it bigger, and I'm going to make it invisible. And I'm just going to say that if the player hits this, so if there's a collision, then what we want it to do is we want it to reset. So we use a scene, and it's already set to restart. The problem is if any of the bullets fall off, it will restart it too, so probably best to set it to player 1. Join that together. If we fall off, it resets. Perfect. But what we can also get this to do is by adding another actuator. Let's add a message actuator to the text, and let's send it that reset message and wire it to the same logic gate. Let's be a little bit clean about it, so we'll call this restart. Restart. And we'll call it score. Reset. Does that work? Let's have a look. Inside the camera, press P, go along, collect a coin. Coins 1. Fall off. Score resets back to 0. Perfect. Awesomeness level 20. Imagine how good this will be when we start to duplicate our coins. Please make sure that you've programmed it and it fully works before you start duplicating your coins. If you're collecting coins and your score stays at 1, make sure that you've set your property to add 1 and not assign 1, otherwise it assigns 1 every time. So like I say, awesomeness level 20, see what you can do with it. Over and out.